Have you ever felt as if life itself was pulling the ground out from under you, leaving you in a tunnel so dark you could not tell where you were going or who you even were? Moments when all the old answers stop working, when the certainties you leaned on collapse, and suddenly the question of why you exist becomes heavier than anything you have ever carried. This is not simply sadness or confusion. It is what mystics and seekers through centuries have called the dark night of the soul. It feels like abandonment. It feels like death of the self you thought you knew, yet hidden inside it is the seed of transformation. Stay with me, because in this video we will walk straight into that darkness together, not to escape it, but to see how it opens into light, peace, and the deeper truth of who you are. When we speak of the dark night of the soul, we are not speaking of an ordinary difficulty or a passing sadness that comes and goes with the weather. We are pointing to a moment in the spiritual journey when the identity you have built, the roles you play, and the story you tell yourself suddenly begin to unravel. It can arrive in the quiet of the night, when you stare at the ceiling and wonder what meaning your life truly holds. It can arrive in the middle of a crowded street, when the noise of the world feels empty, and the thought arises, if I were gone tomorrow, would anything really change? This question is not meant to depress you. It is the beginning of a new vision, a moment when the surface of life cracks and something deeper demands to be seen. At first, this experience is terrifying. We are used to the comfort of our familiar certainties, even if those certainties are built on shaky ground. We know who we are by the names we carry, the jobs we perform, the relationships we maintain. But when these anchors begin to slip away, when you realize they are not permanent and cannot ultimately define you, the mind panics. Doubt arises, fear arises, and sometimes even despair. You might feel that you are dissolving into nothing, that all you believed yourself to be is vanishing into a silence you cannot control. This moment has been described across cultures. In Christian mysticism, St. John of the Cross called it the dark night, a stage where the soul feels abandoned by God. In this state, prayer feels dry, comfort disappears, and what once gave you strength now feels hollow. In Buddhist and Hindu traditions, it appears as the great doubt or the collapse of the ego's illusions. It is not a punishment, but a phase of purification, a dismantling of false supports so that the deeper essence of who you are can emerge. Imagine a seed underground. Before it can rise into the light, it must crack open, it must dissolve, it must endure the darkness of the soil. Only then can it break through and grow toward the Sunday. On a personal level, you may recognize this as a time when you question your relevance, when you wonder if your actions matter or if your presence makes a difference at all. Perhaps you look at your legacy and see how quickly names and faces fade from memory. You realize that even those you love most will eventually move on, and in a few generations, you may be forgotten entirely. This is a sobering truth, and yet it carries a strange kind of freedom. If all the things you clung to for importance are temporary, then perhaps your value lies not in the roles you play, but in the simple fact of being itself. The dark night strips away the illusion of permanence. It forces you to confront the fragility of the ego and the fleeting nature of worldly recognition. At first, this confrontation feels like death, but beneath that death is the possibility of new life. Just as a caterpillar dissolves into a formless state before becoming a butterfly, the self you thought you were must dissolve before the deeper self can awaken. This is why traditions speak of the dark night not as an end, but as a passage, a tunnel that leads from one way of being into another. As you walk through this tunnel, the mind will resist. It will whisper that you are lost, that you will never find peace again. It will cling to old habits, old pleasures, old distractions. And yet, if you stay present, if you simply observe without running away, you will notice something subtle. In the middle of the loss, there is awareness itself, steady and unbroken. Even when every thought dissolves, even when memory falters, even when identity collapses, awareness remains. That awareness is who you truly are. It is not bound by name or form. It is not diminished by death or amplified by fame. It is the silent presence in which every experience rises and falls. This recognition is the first light that appears in the darkness. It does not come as fireworks or as a sudden ecstasy. It arrives quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You realize that the ground you thought you lost was never the true ground. The real foundation is awareness itself, unshakable and timeless. From this discovery, a new kind of strength is born. Not the strength of ego asserting its importance, but the strength of surrender, of resting in the mystery that holds you. The paradox is clear. On the one hand, you are insignificant in the vast flow of history. Names vanish, bodies return to dust, and achievements fade. On the other hand, you are the very essence of the universe, expressing itself as this moment, as this body, as this consciousness. You are both nothing and everything. You are the silence that holds the stars and the breath that rises and falls within your chest. The dark night teaches you to live in this paradox, to accept insignificance without despair, and to embrace uniqueness without pride. As you begin to see this, the fear starts to soften. What once felt like a loss now feels like liberation. What once felt like death now feels like birth. You no longer need to cling to recognition or permanence because you have touched the presence that does not vanish. You can look at the unknown not as an enemy, but as an infinite horizon. The unknown is not there to crush you, but to remind you of the vastness you belong to, a vastness that can never be captured by words or measured by time. In this way, the dark night becomes the doorway to awakening. It is not meant to destroy you, though it may feel that way at first. It is meant to reveal the deeper ground of your being. If you can trust the process, if you can stay with the discomfort, you will find that what emerges is a peace that surpasses understanding. It is a peace not dependent on circumstances, not dependent on recognition, not dependent on anything outside of you. It is a peace that flows naturally because it is what you are. So when you feel lost, when you feel stripped of meaning, when you feel abandoned even by the divine, remember that this very emptiness may be the path itself. The tunnel has an end. The night has a dawn. And the self that emerges is not the small ego trying to control life, but the vast awareness that has always been here, silently waiting to be recognized. When we look more deeply into the dark night of the soul, we find that it is not just a personal struggle, it is part of a universal pattern that mystics, sages, and ordinary seekers have walked through for centuries. The details may differ, but the essence is always the same. Something in us is called to die so that something truer can be born. At first, this can feel cruel because the mind clings to what is familiar. It clings to identity, to comfort, to security. But the deeper wisdom of life is relentless. It does not allow us to remain asleep in illusions forever. The dark night is the alarm that shakes us awake. In the Christian tradition, Saint John of the Cross described this stage as a stripping away of attachments, both worldly and spiritual. Imagine a person who has prayed with devotion for years, who has relied on the sweetness of divine presence to carry them through, suddenly finding that every prayer feels empty, every word falls into silence, and God seems absent. This absence is not a punishment, it is a purification. By removing even the comfort of spiritual sweetness, the soul is invited to love without condition, to trust without proof, to surrender without reward. This is why mystics saw the dark night as a stage of union, the place where the ego dies and only the divine remains. In Eastern traditions, the same passage is described in different language. In Zen Buddhism, there is the great doubt. This is not a small question, like whether your job is the right fit or whether your choices were wise. It is an all-consuming doubt, a collapse of all the structures the mind has built. Who am I? What is this life? What is real? These questions are not answered by logic. They burn away the illusions that cover the mind. The doubt is painful, but it is also sacred because it clears the ground for awakening. Hinduism speaks of vairagya, the cultivation of detachment. During a dark night, desires and pleasures lose their hold, not because they are bad, but because they no longer satisfy. Even spiritual accomplishments feel hollow. This detachment is the gateway to self-realization, because it reveals that the ego self, with its endless wants and fears, is not who you are. Behind it, there is pure consciousness, vast, unchanging, and free. We can also see this universal pattern in the lives of great figures. Consider Nelson Mandela, who spent decades in prison. What could have been despair became for him a crucible of transformation. Stripped of freedom, stripped of recognition, he found a deeper purpose, a strength that could not be taken away. Consider Mother Teresa, who confessed to long periods of spiritual dryness, where she felt no sense of God's presence, and yet she continued to serve with love. These examples show us that the dark night does not belong only to mystics or saints. It belongs to anyone who dares to face the emptiness inside and allow it to shape them. When we face our own dark night, it may not look as dramatic. It may come as a slow erosion of meaning. The things that once motivated you stop working. The people who once felt close begin to drift away. Even your own thoughts feel foreign, like they are speaking a language you no longer understand. It is in these quiet moments of loss that the passage begins. If you resist, if you try to cling, the suffering grows stronger. If you soften, if you stay present, you begin to notice that even in the emptiness, something remains. There is a presence, silent, vast, untouched by despair. This presence is what all traditions point toward. It has many names: God, the Self, pure awareness, the Tao, but the reality is the same. It cannot be lost because it is not dependent on circumstances. It cannot die because it was never born. The dark night reveals this by removing everything else. When all that is false is gone, only the true remains. So how do we walk through this passage without losing heart? The answer is practice. In the West, prayer becomes less about asking and more about resting. In the East, meditation becomes the mirror in which all illusions dissolve. Insight meditation teaches us to observe sensations and thoughts as passing clouds, never permanent, never solid. Zen practice teaches us to sit in stillness, simply watching the mind without judgment. Loving kindness practice softens the heart, reminding us to bring compassion to ourselves even when we feel abandoned. Mantras anchor the mind when chaos feels overwhelming. Breath practices regulate the nervous system, calming the storms of fear. These practices do not eliminate the dark night. They give us tools to endure it, to see it not as punishment but as passage. They teach us to sit in the fire without being consumed. Over time, what once felt unbearable begins to shift. The darkness does not vanish all at once, but little by little, you begin to see glimmers of light. A moment of peace in meditation, a breath that feels steady, a smile that arises unexpectedly. These are signs that the tunnel is opening, that the night is softening into dawn. It is important to understand that this journey does not move in a straight line. You may feel moments of light, followed by deeper darkness. You may feel awakened one day and lost the next. This is natural. The dark night comes in cycles, like waves that rise and fall. Each time, it invites you to surrender more deeply, to trust more fully, to rest more completely in the presence that never leaves. The key is to remember that you are not alone. Across cultures, across centuries, countless seekers have walked the same path. Their stories remind us that what feels like death is also birth. What feels like abandonment is also union. What feels like emptiness is also fullness. You are walking a road that leads not to despair, but to awakening. So if you find yourself in the middle of your own dark night, let these words be a reminder. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a new one. The ground is shaking because the old self is being dismantled. The silence feels heavy because the ego is dissolving. What will emerge is not the small self you once defended, but the vast self that was always here, waiting to be recognized. And when you glimpse even a sliver of that vastness, you will understand why mystics call this passage sacred. The night is long, but dawn is certain. The tunnel is dark, but light waits at the end. The death you fear is only the mask, hiding the face of your true self. As we continue to explore the dark night of the soul, it becomes clear that this passage is not only about suffering, it is also about transformation. Suffering is the doorway, yes, but the purpose is awakening. What feels like loss in the beginning slowly reveals itself as a gift. What feels like collapse slowly shows itself as the clearing of space for something larger to enter. To understand this, we must look closely at how the process of the dark night reshapes us from the inside out. When the ego breaks down, the mind begins to see its own illusions. All the roles, all the stories, all the attachments that seem so solid now appear as fragile constructions. At first, this realization feels like despair, because the foundation you once trusted is gone. But over time, you begin to see that what is gone was never real to begin with. You see that the identity you defended so fiercely was built on shifting sand. The dark night strips away the false so that the true can stand clear. The transformation begins with humility. When you realize how small you are in the vast ocean of existence, pride begins to dissolve. You no longer cling to the idea of being irreplaceable. You no longer demand that the world revolve around your story. Instead, you recognize that life is larger than you, that the flow of existence continues whether you rise or fall. This realization can be frightening, but it can also be freeing. Humility is not weakness, it is spaciousness. It opens you to see life as it truly is, without the distortion of ego. Then comes compassion. When your own suffering has stripped you bare, you begin to see the suffering of others more clearly. You know what it feels like to be lost, to be confused, to doubt everything. From this knowing, a tenderness arises. You do not need to force it. It flows naturally. Because your heart has been broken open, compassion becomes the quiet strength that holds you. And it also becomes the bridge that connects you to others. You realize that the dark night is not only yours, it is a universal passage. And in that realization, you feel less alone. Another fruit of this transformation is acceptance. In the beginning, you resisted the darkness. You fought against it, begged it to leave, demanded that things return to normal. But slowly, you learn that resistance only deepens the suffering. The night softens when you stop fighting it. Acceptance is not resignation, it is openness. It is the willingness to be with what is, without demanding that it be different. This acceptance brings peace, even in the middle of struggle. You begin to discover that peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of awareness within it. Awareness itself becomes your anchor. When everything else collapses, awareness remains. This is perhaps the most important discovery of the dark night. You are not your thoughts, because thoughts come and go. You are not your emotions, because emotions rise and fall like waves. You are not even your body, because the body changes and eventually fades. You are the awareness that sees all of this. You are the open sky in which clouds form and dissolve. This recognition is the seed of awakening. It shows you that your true self was never threatened, never broken, never lost. As awareness deepens, joy begins to return. But this joy is different from ordinary happiness. It is not a fleeting excitement, not a pleasure that depends on circumstances. It is a quiet joy, steady and unshakable, like a flame that cannot be blown out by the winds of change. This joy is born from knowing who you are beyond the ego. It is the joy of being itself, the joy of resting in the infinite ground of existence. The transformation also awakens creativity. When the ego dissolves, imagination is no longer bound by fear or by the need to prove something. A new flow of ideas, insights, and inspiration emerges. You begin to see life with fresh eyes, as if the world has been washed clean. This creativity is not limited to art or music. It shows up in the way you live, the way you love, the way you serve others. It becomes a natural expression of the freedom you have found. Intuition also grows stronger. Without the noise of ego, the inner voice becomes clearer. You sense the right step, not because logic has calculated it, but because awareness itself guides you. You learn to trust this intuition, to walk with it, to let it shape your choices. Life becomes less about control and more about flow. You no longer cling to rigid plans because you know that the universe is alive, intelligent, and responsive. You begin to live in harmony with it rather than against it. This transformation does not mean the challenges disappear. The dark night is not something you go through once and never again. It comes in cycles, each time stripping away another layer of illusion, each time deepening your awareness. But with each cycle, you become more resilient, more peaceful, more free. You learn that the darkness is not an enemy, but a teacher. You learn to bow to it, to welcome it, to let it show you what you still cling to. In this way, the dark night becomes a lifelong companion, not a curse, but a guide. And so, the purpose of the dark night is revealed. It is not to punish you. It is not to destroy you. It is to awaken you. It is to show you the truth that was hidden beneath all the noise. It is to strip away what is false so that what is real can shine. It is to break the shell so that the seed of your true self can grow. When you understand this, the fear begins to dissolve and the night becomes less heavy. You see that even in the deepest darkness, there is light waiting to emerge. This is why the mystics spoke of joy at the end of the night. It is not the joy of the ego getting what it wants. It is the joy of the soul recognizing its own nature. It is the peace that passes understanding. It is the fulfillment that cannot be taken away. And once you taste it, even for a moment, you know that all the suffering was worth it because it led you here to the recognition of who you truly are. As the journey through the dark night of the soul unfolds, one final truth begins to reveal itself. The darkness is not the end. It is the passage into a greater wholeness. The very experiences that once felt unbearable now become the foundation for a deeper peace, a lasting fulfillment, and a clarity that shines through every part of your life. When you cross through the tunnel, you find that what awaits you is not a return to the old self, but the birth of a new self, rooted in awareness, compassion, and freedom. This resolution is not a sudden explosion of happiness. It does not arrive as fireworks or dramatic visions. It arrives quietly, like a sunrise breaking through the horizon. The joy that emerges is steady, calm, and profound. It is not the joy of getting what you want or of life going according to plan. It is the joy of realizing that you are free from the need to cling. It is the joy of resting in awareness itself, which cannot be lost, which cannot be destroyed, which has been present through every moment of your life. What does this look like in daily life? It looks like a new relationship to pain and pleasure. You no longer chase one and run from the other. You see both as passing waves, temporary movements in the ocean of awareness. It looks like a new relationship to success and failure. You no longer measure your worth by outcomes because you know your essence is beyond all outcomes. It looks like a new relationship to others. You see their struggles as reflections of your own, and compassion flows naturally. You are no longer trapped in the small self that demands recognition. You are resting in the larger self that is one with all. The mystics were right when they said the dark night is a purification. What is left after the fire is not ashes, but gold. The ego's illusions are burned away, and the essence that remains is pure, unshakable, timeless. In Christianity, this is called union with God. In Buddhism, it is called enlightenment. In Hinduism, it is called self-realization. Different words, different metaphors, but the reality is the same. It is the awakening to your true nature, the recognition that you are not separate, that you are not bound, that you are the infinite awareness in which all things rise and fall. One of the most important qualities of this awakening is compassion. Having walked through the dark night yourself, you no longer judge those who suffer. You know their pain because you have lived it. You know the weight of despair, the confusion of doubt, the silence of feeling abandoned. And because, your heart opens, you meet others with kindness, with patience, with love. You see that helping them is not separate from helping yourself. Because at the deepest level, there is no separation. Another quality that arises is creativity. Once the mind is no longer bound by fear, once it is freed from the need to control, imagination blossoms. You feel inspired, not to prove yourself, but to express the flow of life moving through you. This creativity can show itself in art, in writing, in music, but it can also show itself in the way you listen, the way you speak, the way you move through each day. Everything becomes an expression of the freedom you have discovered. Peace becomes your constant companion. This peace is not dependent on silence in the outer world. You may still live in noise, in chaos, in challenge, but inside there is a stillness that does not move. It is the eye of the storm, the quiet center that holds you steady no matter what happens. This peace is not fragile. It cannot be broken. It remains even when life feels uncertain, even when losses come, even when change is unavoidable. It is the peace that passes understanding. And once you know it, you can never lose it. And then there is fulfillment. The dark night strips away the search for meaning outside of yourself. It shows you that no achievement, no recognition, no possession can ever satisfy the hunger of the ego. The only true fulfillment comes from recognizing what you already are, here and now. This recognition brings a wholeness, a completion, a sense that nothing is missing. You no longer live in the endless cycle of wanting. You live in the freedom of being. It is important to remember this resolution is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a new way of living. The cycles of challenge may still come. The ego may still rise with its demands. But now you know the truth. You know that you are not the ego. You know that you are the awareness that holds it all. And this knowing changes everything. It gives you resilience in hardship, humility in success, and compassion in every encounter. So what is the light at the end of the tunnel? It is not something outside of you. It is not a prize waiting to be won. It is the light of your own being, shining when all illusions have fallen away. It is the recognition that you are timeless, that you are infinite, that you are the groundless ground of all existence. This light has always been here. The dark night did not create it. The dark night only cleared the way for you to see it. In the end, you realize that the dark night was not your enemy, it was your teacher. It stripped you of what was false so that you could see what is true. It humbled you so that you could open to the vastness. It broke you so that compassion could flow. And it showed you that beyond every identity, beyond every story, beyond every fear, you are pure awareness, eternal and free. This is the resolution. This is the gift waiting on the other side. And once you see it, once you taste it, no darkness can ever frighten you in the same way again, because you know the truth. You know that you are the light itself. If this journey through the dark night of the soul has spoken to you, if even one sentence touched your heart, I invite you to stay connected. Share your reflections in the comments, because your voice may be the light someone else needs to hear. Subscribe to this channel so you can continue walking with me through these deeper teachings, through guided meditations, and through the practices that bring peace in everyday life. And if you know someone who is struggling